Yes, Siesta Ocha all the way to the saxophone. That's right, folks. You've made it to City Business. This is James Moore in the studio with Michael Halley, 4th Council City Council Ward person. I think that's about it.
4th Ward City Councilman.
4th Ward City Councilman. And good to see you, Michael. How you doing today?
Good. Glad to be here.
Well, nice to see you, too. That means the City Council hath met again. Mm-hmm. And what hath it met about?
Well, we met last night, October 26th. Regular time, 7 o'clock, the second Monday. This was the fourth Monday. We meet on the second and fourth Mondays. Here's an informal review of what happened.
Fantastic.
Something new on our consent agenda. We'd asked our city administrator to provide some fund updates on both the general fund and our utility funds. Utility funds include the wastewater and the waterworks departments. General fund include the rest of the departments, so that we could see how the revenues and expenditures are tracking throughout the fiscal year. So it's just another level of fiscal oversight that we now will have. Something actually I've been asking for a while, but our new city administrator, Mike Harmon, is very receptive, and I think that currently the council and the administration are all on the same page. We'll have a few new council members coming up because a few people aren't running again, at least 2 people. So
who will not be running?
Jessica Ledger-Kalin's at-large seat is open, and Tony Hammis, 3rd Ward.
Okay, so Jessica ended up being a one-term.
Yep.
Person.
Well, it was actually...
Was it?
She filled in for a term and then...
Ran again.
Then ran for... I don't know if it's the remainder of that term. It doesn't seem like she's been on all that long.
Time and me, we're
maybe she's been
only tentatively, but she's been there for a bit. And okay, so that means an at-large seat. Mm-hmm. Have people declared?
Yeah, there are 2 names on the ballot for that. But you can look that up easily online or in the paper. Yep. I want to get through this, but
sure.
But yeah, the ballot is a week away. The election's a week away, November 3rd this year.
Wow, is it already November?
It is.
I was telling you, me and time. But, well, fantastic. Let's stay focused then.
Yeah, but in the Fairfield Ledger was doing profiles on the seats, the mayor's seat and the at-large seat, both, because they were contested. They have 2 names on the ballot.
Excellent.
And I'd hope they do profiles on everyone else, though I don't know if they were able to reach everyone. I know Fairfield Economic Development Association and the Chamber partnered to ask questions. They wanted to have an actual Q&A, but not everybody who was running could make it at the same time. So they did it electronically, and I know I submitted some questions. I'm hoping to see the results of that soon, so we can get a feel of who the candidates are, what they stand for.
Well, great. And there's also, of course, on the ballot, we'll talk about this.
The referendum. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of comes up here, and good thing to talk about since it's the last time we'll talk before the vote. We heard from David Humphreys, who's heading up a senior housing project in the old Loudon building, also known as the Broadway building. And to cut to the chase, there's a movie saying for you. We're going to cut to the chase scene. Essentially, to get more points on an application that they're filling out for some grant funds, they needed a city contribution. Well, the city's not in any sort of position to give a cash contribution, so the only thing that we could give would be property tax abatement. Now, we recently changed our urban revitalization code to include not just areas of town, but the entire town. And we set the maximum number of years for property tax abatement to 3 for these kind of properties and these kind of projects. They were asking for 10-year. And while that's generous, the benefit to the community to have 42 senior housing units, low to moderate income senior housing units, was too good to pass up. But the democratic way is that if we offer it to this project, we have to offer it to any project that fits the criteria of multi-residential. So that'd be 3 or more units. So the council felt like at this point we do want to incentivize these kind of projects. We are willing to essentially postpone gaining the increase in property valuation That's what the abatement is. So over that 10 years, the city receives what it would have received had the project never happened. So there's never a loss of revenue, but it's essentially abating or postponing the project paying additional revenue because they're adding value to the property, and therefore the assessment would be higher. With the higher assessment, they would be paying more. We're saying we will not charge you that difference between what it was or is currently and what it will be after the improvements for 10 years. And that's generous, but it's not without precedent. That was the length of the abatement that was given to American when they built. And I remember I was on the Economic Development Committee on the council, and it was a make or break moment. They had other communities willing to offer those kind of deals, you could say, and it has really become the norm. So the benefit to the community is, the benefit to the city is the revenue will be there after the abatement is over. Now this project has a 30-year life where they have to essentially do what they say in terms of low to moderate income housing units. That's part of one of the grants they're applying for, dictates that. So we'll have 20 years of those higher assessment values, higher property tax, and it wouldn't be any reason that they wouldn't stay higher. If they improve what they're doing, what they say they're going to do, it'll be in quite a bit nicer building and then higher assessment, et cetera.
Okay.
And the secondary benefit, obviously, to the community is to have these units available. 55 and older is the cutoff, and so Fairfield's demographic actually has a larger than the state average of 55 and over. So it's going to be needed.
Do you know how much that is?
I don't actually off the top of my head, but yeah. I've seen the comparison and noted that. So we're moving on that at our next council meeting, hopefully by then. But one other thing was that the city incurs legal fees when we make these changes because there's a lot of more involved paperwork that has to be done to make sure it's in compliance with state law. And our city administrator said, we just recently went through this process and incurred those fees. For us to incur them again for this one project is kind of asking a lot. So we made a deal with the developer. They pay those fees. So no cost to the city, no cost to taxpayers for this change. So really a win-win. And we'll see if other developers want to take advantage of it as well. It's not set in stone. If we feel that it's being abused or overused or taken advantage of in some way, we can change it again. And it will still be in effect for 10 years for any projects that get in during the time that it's set for 10 years. It won't, if we change it, it won't change their
which is it
schedule.
One needs to do just so business can function, right?
What's that?
And plan. I mean, you have to plan with windows so people can.
Yeah. Yep. But at this point, it's going to be changed. And so anyone who's interested in that kind of development, take a look.
There you go.
We had a bunch of different action items. We're getting ready for our interim borrowing, which is we got this grant from the USDA, and we're going to be borrowing from the USDA, but they don't actually lend us the money or give us the grants until the portion of the project's complete. It's a kind of a reimbursement schedule. So we have to borrow for the improvements for phase 1 of the wastewater project. Once it's complete, we get the grant, and then the remainder we borrow from the USDA at a low interest rate. All right. This is kind of related to housing. We had created a TIF program that allowed developers to get a rebate after they developed a property into residential, where they could get some of the infrastructure costs recouped. Not all of them, but some. And again, it was at zero cost to the city. The city never lost, but we gave back some of the increment, about 75% of some of the infrastructure costs, only once the projects were actually complete. So if somebody says, I'm going to develop this property, the city said, okay, we'll go and pave the roads and put in water and sewer, hoping you're going to develop it, we could really be out if it never got developed. This requires the properties to actually be on the tax roll, so they have to be finished and occupied, or at least finished, before they can get this. So really it's a good deal, but it also helps the developers keep their costs down so that the properties don't cost too much that no one can afford them. part of that was that we were setting aside a portion of the TIF revenue for low to moderate income properties, and the developers have to include a certain percentage of low to moderate income properties in the development. So in both ways, we're trying to encourage development for low to moderate income.
Which has been a critical need, right?
Yes. And so we had to set what those rates were for an efficiency apartment or home, a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom. And so the numbers that we were provided by a League of Cities were on the high side. They didn't seem all that moderate and definitely didn't seem low. Then HUD, Housing Authority, those were on the low side. And so we took those, or I say we, but Adam Pileggi Economic Development, and then went to local lenders and took the average income that counts for lower moderate income and asked, what would you lend for a property, either, well, in the case of purchasing at this income level. And so they gave some numbers. And so really it was in the middle of those two is where we came out. Now looking at them, I don't see the link here, but I don't have them to read off. I'll try to get them next time, but they're on the city website.
Okay, the city website.
The numbers seemed a little more moderate than low. And the truth is they are, because it's new construction. So it's very hard to do new construction at a low income level. It would have to be either very small or very simple, maybe like the small homes may, if we had a small home division, the tiny homes, that may apply. But in this case, it is more moderate in terms of the new construction. But the thinking is that if you can price them that way, it's a benefit to the developer that they can actually sell them and price them somewhere that's something profitable for them. And then if you have the moderate income families or individuals moving up from wherever they are to these new properties, that frees up the properties they were living in. This is generally how it happens when there's new development, is everyone kind of bumps up to the next level. There's a shift. So we set those, we set a public hearing actually for November 9th, our next council meeting, to discuss those. So then I'll have those numbers
great
for the public.
And again, people interested in this, that's where they show up, right?
Yep. Anybody's interested in any of this, housing, developing, anything like that. Let's see, we had a couple of tax abatements, and we set a plat approval for a hearing for a plat approval for MUM North Campus. So that's actually one of the developments that's going to be utilizing the TIF agreement.
Interesting. Is
an expansion at North Campus Village. So currently it's mostly single homes, some duplexes. I think they may be doing some multi-family homes or buildings out there as well. All right, this was interesting. So how do I give this without going into too much detail? Before the wastewater projects could get the USDA grants, we didn't have any grants available to us. And so we were going with the state revolving fund for borrowing to do all the projects. State revolving fund has a program where instead of paying back interest, you can use those funds for water quality improvement projects. So because the city was going to be borrowing so much, we had about $2 million to spend on water quality improvements. We've been working with conservation groups, farmers, the university, anybody in the Crow Creek watershed to identify projects that would have a stormwater management aspect to them. One that came up was to do a permeable paving parking lot on the north side of the gym and to buy in a piece of equipment to maintain that, because over time sediment and sand can fill in the gaps and it won't actually permeate any longer. So you have to blast that out on occasion. So between the $550,000 for the parking lot and I think about another $75,000 for the equipment, we wouldn't have done that if we didn't have the grant funding. Well, USDA calls us up at one point and says, you've had some sort of demographic change that allows you now to get you can get our grants. And so we applied, we got $2.6 million for phase 1. We can get up to 50% on phase 2, 3, and the work on the plant. So we're really looking at a lot of millions that we could get in grants, which is great. It reduces the amount of rate increases that we need to make.
And of course, grants aren't loans; they're grants.
Exactly. So what happened was, switching to USDA, they said, well, if you get our grant, you have to borrow from us as well. So bye-bye SRF. No big loss, but the one loss was the sponsored projects, the water quality improvement projects, all that funding went away. So the Utilities Committee on the council discussed a one-time, and I make this point one-time transfer of funds from the wastewater department, which had a surplus and had this big grant gain by switching from SRF to USDA, to fund that parking lot, which had a loss from switching from SRF to USDA. And not to do an expensive permeable pave, but just to do a standard concrete, which costs like less than half of the permeable paved. And so the committee approved it. It came to council at our last meeting, and it passed 3-2. We had 2 council members not present. So Jessica Ledger-Kalin, Doug Flournoy, and myself voted yes. I don't recall exactly who voted no. John Revelitsky and one other person voted no. So it passed. And it was Darren Hamilton, the other no vote. So then last night, we were supposed to move into canceling the engineer agreement for the permeable paved parking lot and accepting an engineer agreement for the new parking lot. But since the last time that we met, and this is interesting, the way, I'm not blaming anyone, but it's very hard to report news completely subjectively. Like, I'm not giving objectively. This is not an objective review of council. This is through me, my personality. If you asked other council members, they would do it entirely different. Well,
I tell you what, since Walter Cronkite, it's all been downhill for objective.
So the news report came out about that transfer, and in a sense, it could have been longer. It could have had a little more information. Maybe it could have had some explanation from those of us who voted yes, what we were thinking and why. Maybe the way it was reported stirred up controversy. I don't know. Maybe it couldn't have been avoided. Maybe just the idea of people who are seeing their utility bills going up and thinking, you're going to take money from that department and move it over in a parking lot. Well, that means I'm going to be paying for a parking lot through my utility fee. And it's a reasonable thought. It's not actually accurate, but I could understand that, that would make sense. That would be a concern. So I've actually replied to some concerns after that vote. Well, it was such an issue that the 2 council members besides myself who voted yes decided to vote no and actually retroactively cancel the plans to pave the parking lot and instead put in gravel. So gravel will cost maybe around $80,000 instead of $230 for the paved. The reason I stayed on that I wanted it paved is because I was on the rec center task force, and I remember that the citizens who worked really hard to raise $4.5 million, which is more than half of the project for the pool and gym, wanted that the city would do, besides the $3 million the voters approved, purchase the land for the gym, which we did, and pave that parking lot. Now, the idea is to use the indoor facility as a magnet for indoor sports events, which would happen mostly over the winter, and that the north entrance coming off Burlington would become the main entrance for those people going to the gym. They wouldn't necessarily come down, turn on 9th and come in. One of the main investors or donors to the project was Cambridge Investments, and they gave $1 million, and they have naming rights to the facility. They were also talking about, at one point in a meeting that I attended, putting in a really nice sign there on the north entrance, because if you're from out of town and you're trying to find, where's the sportsplex? There's a sign, you pull in. So the idea that people from out of town, especially over the winter months, will be pulling into a gravel parking lot doesn't seem to fit the scope of what we were really hoping to achieve, which was this building and this facility that would be a pole, would be a, I've been to some neighboring towns' indoor facilities, and I can tell you ours will be right up there with better than most because it's newer and we'll have a lot of nice amenities. And I just worry about safety and how to keep a gravel parking lot clear. Luckily, I like the way Darren Hamilton, who voted no, said. He's like, I want to put this off until we can look at other things. Like, he's not saying no, never pave it. He's saying, I just want to find out more information. So it's going to open in spring. I hope somehow between now and then, we can figure out a way to get that paved.
Fascinating stuff. I didn't know you could undo a vote.
Yep,
I guess
you can.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. A person who voted no can't make the motion.
Oh, interesting.
So it has to be someone who's changed their mind and changed their vote.
Which happened to be in this case.
Which happened to be Ledger Kalin motioned and Flournoy seconded. So they both changed their vote from last time. So there you have it. Interesting times. I know I got to rush here.
Yep. And by the way, you are listening to Michael Halley. This is James Moore, City Business. I usually do it in the middle. Time's slippery today. It's flying by. It
really is. All right. We got to talk about that referendum quickly.
Okay. Yeah.
So it kind of fit into the mayor had a kind of financial state of the city review report that he gave. And it was just putting into context the bond rating downgrade, how that applies to general fund, general obligation bonds, which the city isn't currently taking any out on, doesn't have any plan to take any, that it doesn't limit our ability to borrow, etc. So in one sense, it's not a skies falling situation to have a low bond rating that we have all these steps and are going to get back up. It's actually only one notch down from where it was for most of the 2000s. It was at BAA.
Yeah, because I think it was at 3, triple.
Yeah, so we're at 3, and we were at 2. So we get it up. The next one, we're back where we were, but we want to get it up even higher than that. So that's the plan. But one of the pieces of the puzzle that Moody's wanted to see was a little bit more financial flexibility, not always relying on property tax income. So the referendum that's coming up on the ballot is to change 25% of local option sales tax from wastewater to property tax relief. And I would really call it, I'd say, property tax alternative. It's an income, it's a revenue source other than property tax. It'll, if it passes, it'll be used initially to shore up the funds to get them up. The bond rating will go up as a result. And then after that, the city can take off the emergency levy off the property tax, can fund things that have in the past been funded through property tax. So it really becomes an alternative revenue stream. The good news is the wastewater department, as we know, is receiving grants that we didn't expect and is really doing well in that regard. And so that approximately $200,000 a year, that's about 25% of $800,000, which is about what we've been bringing in per year in local option sales tax, isn't really needed as much as it would have been in the past. So again, I'm not gonna give a pitch either way, but that was the description the mayor gave, and the council did vote unanimously to put that on the ballot. So if you have any questions, ask your elected official for more insight. But that's
and that doesn't always happen really with unanimous for these types of things either, right?
So no, it doesn't. And everyone felt that on the council that this was the right thing to do and the right time to do it. So I know you got to get going.
We do. Any final thoughts there? I guess inspire people to get out there and vote.
Yeah, just vote. Make your voice heard. I mean, it's part of the process, and it needs to be active engagement. So hope everyone gets out there. I'll see you at the polls.
Vote. I was going to say something really profound, but I got nothing here. Also
maybe
coming
Jason could put something on the screen.
November 7th, we got the Southeast Iowa Blues Society with another night of all Iowa blues at the Best Western. But that said, we're KRUU-FM, and so are you. Michael Halley, thank you. Jason Strong for being the silent witness behind the camera. And we have the advantage of being able to see him while we're sitting here. So
he's very handsome, and he likes to smile.
There we go. We'll see you next time. Stay tuned.